I'm excited to be here. I love these conversations. Sometimes they can get a little tense, but they're always fun. And, and even though I am primarily computer science, the math people are always my people. So even when I worked at the Georgia DOE, the team that I sat with and commiserated most with was the math team. So happy to be here with everybody that's here. Uh, So today's talk is something that you probably hear every time you go to a PL over the past 2 years. Everybody's talking about AI and wondering how is it going to change things? How is it going to? And it's gone through every industry that we've had thus far. Like it's hit the medical industry, it's hit the automotive and the manufacturing industry, it's hit um, just about every industry that you can think of. And now it's come to education. And we as educators are racking our brains on, okay, exactly how do we wrap our heads around this? What does this mean for us? Um, and there's a lot of implications. And I don't want to be presumptuous. So I normally start at the beginning and give a nice introduction of what AI is before I get into a longer talk about how it impacts education. Um, I added this slide too. So this is like some historical context. And I am not going to read these to you. So what I'm going to do is play a little music while you guys read these yourself. And where's the music? There we go. All right, so artificial intelligence. Um, the next screen is normally where I talk about it, but let me go back to one of these quotes. Since 1936, when Alan Turing, I don't know if you guys have seen this movie, Benedict Cumberbatch stars as Alan Turing. I'm not really sure what the name of the movie is. The Something Machine. I don't know. I forget the name of the movie. But uh, since 1936, when Alan Turing uh, proposed that we could have these quantities and put them together, and a machine would actually result in a different quantity, or do some mathematical operations. Since that time, the Imitation Game is the one that I was thinking about. That's the one with Cumberbatch, although Enigma is also pretty good. But since that time, we've known that AI was coming, right? Like we knew from then. We've been hypothesizing about it and dreaming about it, and there's all sorts of science fiction books about artificial intelligence and how computers are going to get so smart and do all these wonderful things without us having to tell them to do anything. So we've been talking about it. It's been coming. It's been on the way for a very long time. So even though it's it's new and shiny in the news today, it's not really new and shiny. It's really like, hey, remember us? Um, so I know I like to start talking about what artificial intelligence is. Computer scientists, I take things for granted, but as in general, we know that in a computer, there's inputs. Then when you get inside the computer, it does some things, it processes the inputs, and then it produces some outputs. Those outputs might be a YouTube video or a lesson plan, or a theoretical framework about mathematical operations and things like that. Right? It might be all kinds of different outputs. Well, artificial intelligence is a space when what happens inside the computer, that processing that happens inside, we're no longer as humans able to really track it. Like it's doing stuff inside it's moving faster and doing it's more complex than what we're able to actually track. So it essentially is a really cool black box. You put some stuff in, things happen, and then something comes out. And if you've played with Gemini or ChatGPT or any of these large language models, then you've experienced some of that mystical, magical, experience. So that's what artificial intelligence is at its core. And I mean, it can get a lot more granular. But essentially, it's just the machines have gotten to the point where they can think without us having to tell them what to do, right? Now, over the years, we have, like I said, dreamed about artificial intelligence, and our dreams sometimes outpace our reality. Uh, Although it's much faster nowadays that science fiction becomes science fact, and you'll probably be able to see that in this next slide. When I gave this talk before, I used to say we're a long way from this general artificial intelligence. So let me see if you remember any of these things. This is what we used to think artificial intelligence was. Does anybody remember any of these particular versions of AI? I'm particularly fond of Knight Rider. I always wanted my car to be this, to be able to talk to itself and talk to me and come and pick me up and and read me the riot act if I'm not doing well, right? Like I always wanted my car to be a companion of mine. Um, but I also grew up very fond of Data from Star Trek, this android. And I used to say that we are so far away from this. This is called broad or general AI, as when AI can do a bunch of different things in a variety of contexts without us having to specifically tell it what to do, right? And I used to say we're very far away from this. That was 2 years ago. I used to say that. Today, we're not as far away as we were 2 years ago. If you had asked an AI researcher 10 years ago how long it would take us to get to what they call the singularity, or what they call when AI um, becomes smart enough to operate on its own, be able to do all these broad things. They would have told you we were 50 years away, 100 years away, 50 years at the most. They would have told you that, right? But now, if you ask one, there's some that are saying that it might happen within the next 2 years, right? There are people right now working on, you know, robots that look like the Sunny from iRobot, right? Right now. But they're not here just yet. Right now, in our contemporary society, AI looks more like this and this and this, right? Like we're familiar with these robots that can do one specific thing. It's called narrow AI. So it can clean your floor. It can make recommendations about what you should be watching on TV. That's not always great on that. Like mine is not my Netflix recommender system doesn't know me very well. Um, and then of course the face filters that are on Snapchat and all the different Instagram and the different platforms. That's narrow AI, AI that does something very very specific, right? It stays in its lane. Your Roomba robot is not going to decide that humans do not deserve this planet and trip you on your way inside the house. It's not that broad thinking. It's very very narrow. So it knows your floor and it knows how to clean your floor. That's about it. Um, but it's continuing to evolve, and we're watching it evolve. Um, when when my mother was young, she remembers listening to television on the radio or listening to shows on the radio. Like she remembers that. She's in her 70s now. She remembers listening to shows on the radio. Then she remembers transitioning from that to black and white, and then from that to Technicolor, the whole Wizard of Oz thing where Dorothy walks in and then all of a sudden goes from black and white and the colors comes on the screen. That whole thing. She remembers experiencing that, and then to the full colors, and then to HD, and now she watches Netflix on her smartphone, right? So in her lifetime, she's seen technology evolve in some amazing and tremendous ways. And if Moore's law is going to hold true, we're going to see it evolve even further, even faster, right? Just because things move so quickly. I'm sure you guys are experiencing and seeing that. Um, there's a new AI agent or tool that comes out every day, every other week. Um, but as these things come out and as they evolve, we tend to ask ourselves some pretty existential questions. One of the ones that you hear often is, will AI take my job, right? And that's going across all industries, even in education. Folks like, am I safe? Is it going to come in and begin to teach our children, and then you no longer need teachers? So these are the questions that burn in our brains, and that we have these. Sometimes we talk about them out loud, and sometimes we just hold them secretly in our heart. I'm just going to keep moving and hope that it doesn't happen until after I retire, right? Um, I would challenge you all to stop thinking, will AI take my job, and start thinking about how will AI transform my work? How can we leverage these tools these different agents to change the way that I do things. Some of you are already doing it. Like there are teachers all over the country right now, all over the world, that are using AI to do lesson plans and to create assessments and things like that. They have all these new tools and shiny new tools. Another thought that I would offer is to consider how will AI transform work for my students, and not just because of the tools, but just in general, AI is going to fundamentally change our praxis, how we do things. If you were around for the introduction of the calculator or the introduction of the word process, I'd love, just for kicks and giggles, show in the chat how many of you all learned how to type on a type, right? So you understand the transformative power that these devices can have, that one piece of technology can change, right? Remember You remember, typing your research paper and making a mistake and be like, I'm just going to ignore that one. And then you make another mistake and you be like, nope, I got to take that whole thing out and either white out. Do they even sell white out anymore? I don't even know if that's real thing. But white out or just ball it up, throw it to the side, put a new and start all over again, right? So if you remember that change, then you can kind of understand what we're going through. And right, I've lost so many papers when it didn't automatically. Oh, I remember a time in high school when I spent like the night. I spent the entire night finishing up a research paper that I should have probably been doing over the previous 2 weeks. But I spent an entire night and lost it in the morning. Oh my god! Um, but if you've experienced those things, then that you know what it's like to have some new technology come in and revolutionize how things operate in teaching and learning, right? You know that experience. Um, so I propose that this is a new technology that's going to revolutionize how teaching and learning, and as a result, we all need to be involved. We all need to have some fundamental AI literacy, um, and not just all of us as teachers, but all of our students as well. Like everybody needs to have this. This is a I use literacy intentionally because literacy has long been the demarcating skill between your ability to operate in society and not, right? If you have literacy, then you have all these wonderful opportunities available to you. You can go to college, you can do this, you can do that, you can be a chef, an engineer, and all of this stuff. But if you don't have literacy, then you are restricted to these few opportunities. And sometimes those equate to jail. As a matter of fact, they use the literacy rates of third graders, or at least they have. I don't know if they still do this. I assume they are because capitalism. They use the literacy rates of third graders to determine how many jails. Right. That's how important the idea of literacy is, and I think that's going to be how important the idea of AI literacy is as well. Like I think we need to start including this in our fundamental literacy conversation, or numeracy, if you will. So when I say AI literacy, I mean very specifically understanding how computing devices process language, understanding in what ways AI process things differently from humans, understanding the limitations of AI, both physically and ethically, and being able to advocate for responsible, ethical, and equitable AI, and use agents in the same fashion, right? We use them responsibly, ethically, and in an equitable fashion. So this is what I mean when I say AI literacy. Some of this lives in the realm of computer science, where I live, right? This understanding how computing devices process language and make decisions, right? That's a computer science consideration. But the use of these tools is more of an ed tech consideration, right? How to use these tools to create assessments or to grade papers. Can I use AI to avoid having to go home on the weekend and grade papers all week? Can it do that for me? Because if so, it's my best. Right. So I think we all need this as educators. And I think we all need to be able to give this to our students as, eventual citizens in this society. Um, but, you know, what is that? So let's talk about AI first broadly about and how it's impacting our world. Um, who it's only 8:30, but who has already used AI this morning? Anybody? already already tried it out. You've already done something this morning that leverages AI. You've already looked at your Snapchat and did some face filters and sent it off to somebody, or asked Google a question and Google's like, oh yeah, I can tell you what the weather is, and I can tell you, or in about 15 minutes, my watch is going to tell me to get up. and move around, right? It's going to tell me that I need to get out of my chair. I've been sitting here too long. Um, so these are things. So it's already here. In what ways? And I'll say some on the screen, but what ways are you using? So I see you all in the chat already. Turned on my plant lamp, right? It's already doing stuff. So these are some. It's already in our world and it's integrated into everything that we do. Gen AI can level the playing field. Generative AI, and let me differentiate between AI broadly and these large language models that Gen AI that's really taken the world by storm. That's a specific type of artificial intelligence. There's all sorts, robots and all that kind of stuff. But these large language models, the ones that can generate language and concepts that you can ask it to do an email or something like that, that's generative AI. But it can do a whole lot as far as leveling the playing field, reducing stress, saving time. Um, a story that I tell about leveling the playing field, and my partner, she used to work for the Boys and Girls Club. She works for a school system now, but used to work. We're both educators, and she used to work for the Boys and Girls Club. And the larger Boys and Girls Club, the national org, gives out grants to the more local clubs, right? You know, your Atlanta Boys and Girls Club, your Macon Boys and Girls Club, your Rhode Island. They give out grants to the smaller clubs. Well, there was some beef between the larger club and the club my partner worked for. I don't know what it was, but while they had given this grant opportunity to all the rest of the clubs 3 months ago to prepare for this grant so they could, do a proposal, they gave it to this local club with 3 days before the proposal. Right, so she got it. I think she had about a week. She had a week before she had to turn in this grant proposal. If you've ever written a grant proposal, you know that they can be extremely in depth and intricate, and there's a lot that goes into it. Well, my partner, she went and threw it into Chat GPT, and it spit out a rough draft of a grant proposal in minutes, like that. And then she spent the next 2 days personalizing it and making it reflect her particular circumstance and context and putting herself and her ideas into it and submitted that proposal and got the grant, right? And was awarded the money, right? So even if, the large org doesn't like me, I can still produce a phenomenal grant proposal because I'm using generative AI. I have these tools available in my life, right? It helps to level the playing. And there are lots of other ways too that we want to talk about. Robots. I don't know if they have this in Delaware. They just got these at Georgia Tech this past year. These robots that will deliver your food to, you can order food on like this little app that I can go to, and I can order something from Panda Express or Tin Drum or, I don't know if you guys don't have Chick-fil-A up there. I don't eat Chick, but I could order something from Chick-fil-A, and in about 25, 30 minutes, a robot will show up outside of where I work, like, in the building. It'll say, hey, come outside and pick up your food. And I'll go outside and I'll scan it and it'll pop open and I'll get my drink and my food out, right? These robots they're everywhere. And then Amazon, FedEx, they're all exploring and investing in ways to use robots to do some of their deliveries as well. Um, have you all ever been in a restaurant, one of these restaurants where the robots will come to your table and take your order or deliver your food or anything like that? Those are cropping up everywhere too. I've seen a couple of those. Um, uh, I went to a Dunkin' Donuts. There's a Dunkin' Donuts around the corner from my house that I went to, and I go pull up in the drive-through, and I say, they'll say, "Welcome to Dunkin' Donuts. Can I take your order?" Like, can I get a chai latte with almond milk? One chai latte with almond milk. Anything else? I'm like, can I get an egg and cheese croissant? One chai latte with almond milk. One egg and cheese croissant. Anything else? Are you a human being? I am Dunkin' Donuts AI assistant, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, God, right? Like these are jobs that were originally the jobs of our students, right? Our high school students would have these jobs in the past. Like they would be the workers taking these orders. Well, I've seen these AI agents taking orders at Dunkin' Donuts, um, at I think at Burger King in a restaurant once. So they're coming, right? They're going to. I asked the lady that worked at Dunkin'. When I went to go get my food. There was a lady that served me, and I asked her, I'm like, so how do you feel about this AI robot taking orders? She says, oh, I love it. It's fantastic. Um, we used to need 8 people during rush hours in order to fill all the orders and be able to be sufficient. Right now, we only need 3, and I got a raise, right? Because they don't have to pay all these other people. they can give the people that they do have a raise. And I think that's a little microcosm of things that can happen in all sorts of industries, right? Um, so the robots are here. Language. This is probably, in my opinion, one of if not the most powerful AI advents right now. One of the most powerful. The language interpreter levels the playing field in so many ways. My partner and I are probably going to go to Greece pretty soon for like a honeymoon, right? And I've been on Duolingo like a madman trying to figure out, I don't speak Greek. How do I? Oh my God, I need to learn. And it's not going to be enough, right? But with these AI agents, I have a translator in my ear, right? That as they speak, it'll tell me what they're saying, right? Right, the closed captioning that I'm using right now, fantastic example of it. That's true. Um, but if you have, you know, students in your class that are English language learners, or parents, for instance, that speak another language fluently and English only partially, you can put a phone on the desk in front of you, and it'll translate in real time between you and them. You can have a phone call with a parent and speak in your phone in your language, and they'll hear it in theirs, and then they'll speak back in their language, and you will hear it in yours. Right? Somebody's already doing that in their IEP meetings. Right? So um, this has got to be like one of the most powerful advents of AI, and I think we're only scratching the surface of what it can mean. And I don't know if you guys watch Star Trek. When they would go to a new planet, they would always have this translator, and it would go, and all of a sudden they could talk to the natives of this new planet. Like I feel like we're there. Like science fiction becoming science fact real fast. Um, I already talked about my watch telling me I need to get up and move around. How many of you ever have had Outlook already tell you that you need to take a break? You need a focus session. You need to take a break and put some time on your calendar. Outlook is managing my well being now through AI agents. And we talked about face filters, the recommender systems, um, and then the AI tutors and lesson planners. I haven't tried these. I haven't been in the classroom in a couple of years, so I have not tried Conmingo yet, or the AI tutor. I think IXL has an AI tutor as well. So I don't know how well they are. You guys can comment on if you tried them and if they're any good. Um, but I know that they're out there. I know that Magic School and what else is out there. I know there's a lot of these new tools out there that can do some of this tutoring. Um, we know from educational psychology, and when if you go to these educational schools, they'll tell you that the sooner you can give students feedback, the more effective their learning experience is, right? And these tutors can be leveraged to give students almost immediate feedback. My son is upstairs. He's not doing Khan Mingo, but he's upstairs doing Khan Academy now, because before the weekend starts, before you get on games or watch shows, you need to go ahead and get your Khan in mornings, right? So he's doing that right now. And he's getting immediate feedback, right? Like as he's doing it, it's telling him, hey, this is right. Hey, I want you to try this. Da, da, da. So it's a tool that we can definitely leverage in what we're doing. Then there's also some harm that AI is already doing right now. We need to be mindful of this. There is some, bias already built into AI, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But there's policing bias. I have a colleague that has done AI for IBM for like 30 years, and he's told me that 3 out of the 5 police departments in the state of Georgia are using AI to do profiling, right? And it's not always great in what it does. We'll talk more about how that's a problem, or how that can be a problem. Credit or loan denial. My same friend, the one IBM, he told me that he had some of his friends that were moving from New York to Georgia, and these were upper middle class folks. They make more than I do by a large more margin, right? So they were moving. We got plenty of down payment money, and they both have great jobs. But when they applied for a loan at the bank, they were denied their loan. And the bank said, hey, AI flagged you and said that you can't get this loan. And because they didn't have, advocacy and all of that, they went home and hung their head and were really confused about what's going on and why would they, we have great credit. Why couldn't we get this loan? And they talked to my friend over dinner, and he went back to the bank and said, hey, I need you to give me the report, the readout of what they were flagged on. And it turns out that the wife had let her brother live with them when he got out of jail to get back on his feet. And because they shared a resident with a felon recently, they were denied access to this loan, right? To this home loan, right? Not because they didn't have the ability to pay off the loan or because they didn't have the necessary credit. It's because they shared a residency with us, right? That's something that a human might have a little bit more understanding on, but an AI agent is going to say like, nope, you don't get that, right? So it makes some improper recommendations, uh, and health and public service recommendations as well. I'm not going to belabor these. Keep moving. I don't know. I know what my time is like. I can get to talking and be rather long-winded about some of these topics. Um, but privacy violation. You can put something, and we've been telling students, right? Like, look, don't put all your information on the internet. Don't do that. That's not smart. You know, people will find you and all that. But you can put some innocuous information on there and put it over here, and put some other information on the internet over there, and then some other random information over there. And a human would be hard pressed to find all of that information and collect it. But an AI agent can scroll the internet really, really fast and go, let me this, and this, put together a picture of you that you probably didn't want to share as a whole picture, right? So there's some potential threats as far as privacy violations that exist with these AI agents. And then processing power, like they burn energy, they have a huge carbon footprint, and especially once we get into more quantum computing, that's going to like be a huge consideration in regards to how much energy they burn. And then, as I said before, the AI agents don't think like humans. They don't have the same considerations we do. They're inhumane at this point. There's a talk going on Monday at Georgia Tech that I'm excited to go and hear, and it's philosophers from all over the country and physicists and whatnot. And the question is, will AI ever have a soul? I'm like, what? I love existential questions. Unfortunately, it is at the same time that they're screening. What is that math screening that's going on around the country right now? Count it out. Have you all seen that or looked at that?
Yes,
The
we
two things
hosted
are
it in our state.
the two things are happening at the same time on Monday evening at 6 p.m. and I am torn. Like I was yesterday. I was like, oh my god, what do I do? I need to. I'll figure it out. But there's definitely this consideration that right now AI agents aren't humane. They don't think about the things that we would consider in the classroom. There's a lot of stuff coming on the horizon, and we can, you know, I've done workshops where I just sit and we'll talk as teachers and educators about what's coming, what's happening, what do you foresee for AI? One of the cool things that I think that I'm a huge fan of autonomous vehicles and the advent of autonomous vehicles. The reason is because whenever I'm driving, I look to my left and that person's on their phone. I look to my right and that person's on their phone. I look in my rearview mirror and that person's on their phone. Right? We are in a distracted driving society, and that's not even to bring up the drunk driving and the sleepy driving. I'm a sleepy driver. I get tired, and it's a hazard, right? If I go driving after 9 p.m., it's a hazard. I'd love to be able to hit a button and be like, take me home. I'd love for that to happen. And I can't wait. I think we're probably 5 to 10 years away from that, but I'd love for that to happen. Transforming construction and some of these other dangerous jobs. I don't know if you guys know that construction is, outside of being a soldier, the most dangerous job on the planet is being involved in construction. And AI has some really cool tools and advanced the AI and 3D printed homes and whatnot that can make construction a lot safer. So that's pretty cool. And then big data, being able to process some of these large problems, global warming and food shortages and all that kind of stuff. Being able to pull all this data in and process it, come up with some analysis that are variable, that are very helpful. That's good. And again, this is all data, right? This is all mathematical considerations and probabilities and all of that kind of stuff. And then there's also, like, and we've talked about some of them, the workforce revolution. It's going to shift all the jobs. All the jobs are going to shift from one place to another. And we used to say we're preparing for students for jobs that don't exist yet. Now that's even more prevalent a thing. I think every job, every single career, I've heard some proponents say that within the next 5 years, every job, every person that's working will have an AI agent working alongside in some capacity, right? Every single one. So jobs are going to be very, very different than they are now. So there's a revolution coming, and we get to watch it happen. The widening of the digital divide. We talked about the grant stuff, but what if it's a student that's applying for college, and you know they have to do these college essays, and they're faced with the most terrifying, most intimidating thing on the planet, that blank white screen with the blinking cursor, right? How do I get started with this? How do I write this? Oh, I need to talk about myself and some challenge that I've overcome. Oh, what do I write? How do I get started, right? So they might take a week to write this one college essay versus a student that's using this generative AI models might start with a rough draft and spit out 15 of these college essays in that same week. So the student that's using generative AI, that's been trained on it, that has comfort and familiarity with it, will have many, many more college acceptances than the student that's not using it. And that's the same difference between somebody that's using a typewriter and a word processor, somebody that's using a calculator versus not, right? That's the difference. Is this technology could potentially widen the digital divide or and exaggerate structural oppression. AI systems are often paired with historical data, which may have its roots in historical bias, right? So an example is that historical policing data will depict Black people as criminals. That's not true. Likewise, historical STEM workforce data will reflect that the STEM fields are not for women. Also, not true, right? But because the data shows that, and these AI systems are trained on that data, then the AI will pick up those biases, right? And that's a threat that we are living with right now. I am going to read this one. Historical positions of bias regarding persons with different abilities, rural communities, low socioeconomic communities, religious groups, or any other demarcating characteristic around which there has ever been discrimination has the potential to leak into the AI agents that are trained by historical data, right? And we as a populace, we as a citizenry need to understand this and be able to speak to this when folks are proposing a new AI agent for our schools, right? Or a new AI agent to come in and help with the students or do something with our parents or even in our community, right? So my recommendation is that any agent developed for any social context should be trained with a sample that's representative of the population that it intends to serve, right? If this is going to serve your schools, then it should be trained on at least 50% girls, period. Without, if it's not, if you can't say, show me that training data and it has 50% women in that training data, then I shouldn't be using this AI agent, right? And unless we are an informed citizenry, then we don't know to advocate. We don't know to have that conversation, right? Um, so that's one of my recommendations. I do a lot of these recommendations. I don't know if I have time to do a whole lot this morning, but so that's one of my strong recommendations. Is that anytime an AI agent comes in, question the trainings, right? Question the data that they were trained on, and whether or not it's going to be effective or whether or not it's going to marginalize some of your students. We don't need that. All right. So back to AI literacy. I said that it sits in two different buckets, right? There is teaching about AI, which is like a computer science consideration. Um, I think there are some of these things that are good for every student, but every student is not going to be a software developer. They're not going to go and work for AI. Great, sounds good. They're not going to go and work for Google or Microsoft, right? But I think understanding what's happening when you get into an autonomous driving vehicle, what's happening when you talk to Alexa or Google or Siri or whoever, like what's happening under the hood and what makes them, how do they process language? How do they make decisions? I think that's valuable for everybody. And I think at some point we'll need to find a way to ensure that everybody gets it. I don't know what that looks like, right? They're all over the country right now determining whether or not computer science should be a graduation requirement and all that kind of stuff. So those are larger conversations. But at some point, I believe everybody should develop some basic like some literacy about the just the undergirding ways that AI works, how it impacts our society, what is it going to do to our classroom, those sorts of things. And then there's teaching with AI, like using these tools for teaching. Um, and some of you all, like I said, are already using them on a regular basis. And some of you all have seen how they've changed your praxis. How many of you all are familiar with PhotoMath? Yep. So you've seen how you can you can no longer send that worksheet home with your students and say, hey, as long as you show your work, I'll know that you did it. Go home and do this worksheet full of math problems, and bring it back and turn it in. That's a homework grade. That's no like that was high school for me. I was I always had to show my work, and if I didn't, I didn't. I didn't get credit for this homework, right? You could have used a calculator. You didn't do that work, right? Now, photo math means that you don't necessarily have to show it. They can still turn in perfect homework and not have learned anything. So, as a math instructor or as a math educator, we have to think and reflect on how does this change our practice? How does this change our grading? How does this change what we require students to be able to do and know and whatnot? And it's a conversation that I think we should be having with each other, right? It's not something that I think that I can solve myself and be like, this is the way it's going to be, and this is how we should from now on do math education. I can't do that. I don't have that. I'm not that wise, and I don't even believe in that sort of approach, right? I believe in coming to a quorum, right? Like us together as a group of folks figuring out how this is going to evolve our praxis and what we do. So I think more of these conversations need to be had amongst us about what's going to change. Um, Maybe you all saw this about a month ago. These headlines uh, were all over the news and everything. Any of y'all see any of these headlines? Um, what I saw after these came out um, was some, some acceptance, some cautious optimism, and some scathing condemnation. Right, like the across the board, there was a wide range of different reactions to this news. So there's a charter school, and it's called 2 Hour Learning, a charter school system, and they exist in Texas, and they've opened a new school in Arizona, right? And their model is to have the students for 2 hours a day for their academic training. This is their academic component of their day. Sit in front of an AI agent for 2 hours, and that be their academic day. And then the rest of the day, the teachers who aren't, they don't call them teachers anymore. The teachers will do other stuff like financial literacy or some social emotional learning stuff, or those other things, which we value, right? But whether you are in support of this or whether you are terrified by it or angered by it, either way, it struck a chord for everybody that I saw that was able to mention or saw these, right? It struck a chord because as educators, this is that threat. Like if it's happening in Arizona and Texas, if if their test scores say something like they like if they're at least on par with test scores in a comparable school, then it's going to be coming to my state and your state before long, right? There's some people that are going to be trying this before long. I think their academic stuff. I think they use Conmingo and iExcel or something like that for their 2 hours or something like that. I think that's. But fundamentally, what we do as educators is going to change. It is changing. It's evolving, and my contention is that we need to be the ones that are actively engaged in that evolution. We need to be having these conversations. We need to be reflecting on the the tools that are being brought into our schools. We need to know what the students are using. Like, what are they engaged with? Did y'all know that there's an AI that is comes automatically on Snapchat, right? That your students can talk to and interact with. Like it's if their friends are busy because they're in class, but they're trying to chat with somebody, and their friends aren't available. They can chat with this AI bot, and it'll respond to their questions, and it'll say, "Oh my God, I can't believe that happened," right? And they're developing a whole relationship with an intelligence that ain't human, right? Um, a research friend of mine said that we have to be prepared for this new intelligence that's coming into our society. And it's not, we have other intelligences. We've been living with other intelligences in our society for a long time, right? That don't input things the same way we do. They don't process things the same way we do. They don't do the same kind of output that we do as humans, right? We've been living with dogs and cats. They're completely different intelligence, right? But we've incorporated them into our lives and into our society. This is going to be another intelligence that we incorporate into our lives and into our society. And as educators, we are responsible for thinking about how is this going to impact education. So I propose some reflective thoughts, some questions, right? I contend that we should think about how has the creative process changed over the years, right? Um, I remember a time when, in order to do a research paper, I have to go to this magical place called the library and use this antiquated system called the Dewey Decimal System to find books, real books, you know, hard books with paper inside and all of that, and put the books in my book bag, not my laptop, but the books in my ride going through the card catalog. Put the books in my book bag. I would go home with these little note cards, these little, index cards, and go through these books and take notes, right, on these index cards. Another note, another index card, nothing that have this whole stack of index cards. I would take those index cards and I would go through those notes and turn them into an outline. And I would take that outline and turn it into a rough draft. And take that rough draft and turn it into a second draft, take that second draft, turn it into a final draft, and then turn it in. That's not the way research happens anymore. Now kids go, if they have a research topic, they go straight to Google and say, Google, tell me about Rosa Parks. And Google will bring up a whole bunch of websites. They'll take those websites and go through them. And from those websites, go right to the rough draft. And from that rough draft, or from the outline to a rough draft, from the rough draft to a final draft, and that final draft, they'll turn it in. Well, now they don't even have to go through that process. They don't have to do an outline anymore. ChatGPT will start them right off at the rough draft. And I say that on purpose. Rough draft. We have to help our students understand that these are tools for use and not crutches. Don't take that thing you got from ChatGPT and turn it in. Don't do that. Don't do that. Any more than you should take an email that you get from Chat that you create with ChatGPT or Gemini and send that email off. You should always go through it and evaluate it. But that's for us to think and to reflect on what's changing, right? How has it changed over the years? And what are the essential aspects of the creative process that we need students to know? What do we still need them to know? And it's not there's some knee-jerk reactions. And like, I remember, and I kind of still live in this space, but I know a lot of people that have moved away from this. But I remember when calculators came out and as math evolves, they say, oh, we don't need to memorize timetables anymore. I'm like, no, I'm not comfortable with that. But that's because I spent my life memorizing timetables and knowing what 7 times 7 is off the top of my head. It's been a benefit to me in my life. That's, I mean, I'm anti. I also learned how to drive on a standard shift car, right? Like there are things that I know that my 7-year-olds may not ever need to know. My 12-year-olds, he's probably going to learn. He can't wait to learn how to drive a car. He can't wait, right? But my 7-year-olds may not ever need to learn how to drive a car, and that's disconcerting for me, right? Learning to drive was a rite of passage for me. Like that let me know that I was coming into my own. Is I can drive now. You need me to go to the store? I'll go to the store and get that for you. Right? I'll go get it. There's no problem. Just give me the keys. I'll never. Like I remember that being how I approached driving, but to think that that may go away is disconcerting for me. And as educators, we have to wrestle with some of these ideas about what is going to go away or what's going to evolve and what we need students to know in order to operate in society, right? What is changing? And in every field, every content area is going to be a little bit different, right? I imagine right now that if there is a parallel conference going on for English teachers somewhere, that they are pulling their hair out because these large language models are really, really upsetting English and social studies, right? But what is going to change with photomath? What's going to change with the Desmos calculator now being a consistent tool in our teaching and learning practice? What is changing with all of these different tools that are available to us? What do we still need students to know? And what does AI co-opt in that process? How does AI change what we've been doing? And that's a reflection. I don't have all the answers for that. But then this is the other one: is what does it not support in student development? Like, is it going to make them lazy? Is it going to handicap them? Is it going to limit their creativity, their agency? Right? What does it co-op? What does it not support that we as educators are still we're still required to do? Like we still need to lean in and say, hey, you need this resiliency. Hey, You need to still have this creativity. You need to have agency. You need to feel empowered to do this, 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 and this. Like, how is it going to change some of the things that we found fundamental? And what do we still need to lean in on? How can we make sure that it is a tool and not a crutch? That it does not promote a dependence or a laziness, right? It is real easy to lean on that. I think I heard somebody in the chat say earlier that it it helps tremendously with spelling. People don't realize that I'm a terrible speller, right? Because the word processor makes it look like I can spell wonderfully, like I'm great. Like, my vocabulary is fantastic, but being able to spell those words, I love using the word Schadenfreude. I love that word. I love telling my son, like, we don't participate in Schadenfreude. We don't take joy in the pain of others. But I couldn't spell it if you gave me an hour. There's no way, right? But the word processors, Microsoft Word will put a little red line underneath it, and all of a sudden, I know how to spell Schadenfreude. Um, so how do we make sure that these new agents are going to be a benefit to our students and not a detriment, not a retarding experience for them, right? And that's a I've done workshops where I have the teachers will sit as a group and reflect on how AI is going to change Bloom's taxonomy, which is one of these fundamental educational frameworks, right? That we all learned about in the educational space. But where does AI lean in here, right? If we were to reflect on this, what and I have my opinions, right? But as educators, what part of this gets co-opted by AI, and what part of this do we still need to lean into as teachers? I definitely lean and contend that this part right here, the evaluating, that still needs to be us as humans. Like, no matter what ChatGPT pushes out, or Gemini pushes out, or Copilot pushes out, we still need to evaluate it for whether or not it's solving the problem that we need to solve, right? If a year and a half ago you would put a math problem into ChatGPT and it spit something out, you should be very, very skeptical about what it spits out, because it was not very good at math. It's still not great, but it's better now that they put that Wolfram Alpha behind it, right? So it's gotten better, but you should still be able to evaluate whether or not this answer makes sense. And that's something we've done in math classes for a while, right? Like, you get out an answer, like, does this answer make sense, right? Should it be large? If you're going from feet to yards, should the number be larger or smaller? Does this answer make sense, right? And that's something that I think we as educators still need to lean into and be able to teach is, does it make sense? So that evaluating part, I don't think we give that up. The creating part, maybe, right? Like, maybe some of that these AI agents can do, right? Like, they can come up with some solutions and some models and some prototypes that, like, on the fly, really, really quickly. Um, I'm looking at some of these solutions that ChatGPT has come up with in the chat. That's funny, right? But your students don't necessarily know that. They don't know that that's a ridiculous answer, right? They don't know that it's rounding necessarily, or whatever. Like, they don't know what it's doing. So how does, like, I think we as a group have to at some point come together and continue to reflect on how does it change Webb's depth of knowledge, right? Like, where does it push in? Is it a DOK? Will AI help us push our students towards this DOK4, this extensive thinking? Like, can we use it as a tool to 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 scale towards that and push towards this higher level thinking? I think that's something that we should be considering and figuring out, right? That is a great conversation. See, those right there. That's why we need to have these conversations with other educators, right? Be able to go in the classroom and have a conversation with the students about, what did chat understand in order to spit out that answer? What did it do? How did it come to its its solution? Um, so those sorts of strategies, I'd like to be able to collect those and begin to put those into a book and say, hey, educators, these are some thoughts that other educators are thinking about how to leverage um, these. Oh, that TI-84. I have like personal horror stories about the TI-84 calculators. Um, I'll give it to you. If you, I took AP Stat, and in the beginning, they make you go through all the distributions by hand. my teacher was like, yo, you're gonna learn these distributions. You're gonna do the binomial and the chi squared, all the distributions. Go through all these by hand and learning. It was a grueling, tedious process. And then about a month and a half in, 2 months in, he said, all right, pull out your TI-84 calculators. You'll never do those distributions by hand ever again. This is how you do them on the calculator. I was like, right? And it changed my entire world. Um, so I have some nightmares about learning all the distributions, but it's this calculator makes me not have to do that anymore. It does the graphing, it does the distributions, it'll do right all these wonderful things. Um, but we as educators have to change how we teach. Do we teach math like that now? Do we say, hey, you know, this is how you do the thing. Now use photomath and evaluate its output, right? And be able to explain the steps that it pulls out. I don't know, something like that. Like, what is the process now that these tools are available to our students and to us as educators? How does it impact the blah 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 design process, right? Whatever that is, software engineering, whatever, STEM design, whatever the design process. They all have the same basic fundamental structure. Um, define the problem. I think that's still us, right? I think that's still human beings. That's prompt engineering. And I think there's something we can do to lean in here even more. And I don't really know what it is, but in computer science, you can define the problem really, really well, right? That means you have to understand the problem really, really well in order to come up with a really, really good question. Then you can feed that into the computer, and it can come up with a solution that's valuable. But if you define the problem and it's poorly, and then this part here, this prototyping part, the Chat GPT or Gemini, they do that part, they come up with an answer, and then you look at it and you evaluate it, and you're like, oh, that's not what I needed at all. That's not the right answer. That's not in the right context. That doesn't fit my. Then you got to go back and redefine the problem because you didn't define it well in the beginning, right? So this is valuable for us. This is essential for us. This we might begin to farm out a little bit, but I think we need to be reflecting on all of this, right, as educators. Um, all right, so I think my time is winding up, and I'm happy to open it up for questions. This is a long slide deck. There's a lot more going into it. We have some guidance in Georgia that just released a month ago, less than a month ago, about AI in schools and never put in. When I was at the meeting in Chicago, where I think I met Crystal, somebody said that they told a horror story about somebody using ChatGPT to do IEP, and now all of that very personal, very private information is available inside ChatGPT database, right? So we should never put PII into the ChatGPTs or your Geminis or things like that. And you should always do some training. You should definitely do some training. So these are like highlights from the Georgia state policy. Like I said, this just came out, I think, 3 weeks ago. And these are the schools and school districts that already have some sort of AI policy in place. There are 213 school districts in Georgia, so we have a long way to go. But these districts and schools already have some sort of policy in place related to AI. And then these are some of the states that either have a policy in place or in process related to AI. And Teach AI is a really, really good project where they're talking about how to develop these policies, how to develop policies for your district, policies for your school level, for your things to send home to parents, things for students, right? Guidance on what to tell students. A lot of them read like, your plagiarism policies and things like that. Like if you're going to use AI, make sure that you say that, like, cop to it and say you're using things like that. So this is a really good website to reflect on as well, as far as how to develop some of those, give some good templates. And I would charge you before you leave, if you haven't tried it, you should, right? You should go out and, if you're on your phone or on your computer, go to the website and try it. If you've never tried it, you should not leave here today without having tried some Gen AI. It could be ChatGPT or Gemini or Copilot. I don't know what your school districts are using, but go home and try it. Or try it now. These are some sample prompts that you can use. And I think I'm coming right up on time. So not using Gemini much, but use ChatGPT. Yeah, my partner just did a couple of trainings for her school system, and the first training was on ChatGPT. The second one was on Copilot, and then the third one was on Gemini. And Gemini, by far at this point, is the most personable, right? You can choose your voice and have some conversations and whatnot. So there's that. But I would definitely try it before you leave out today. And I think that's all I got. I mean, if you guys want to continue the conversation, I host a monthly talk where we just get together and talk about AI, right? So you feel free to join us. It's open to anybody and everybody. This past month, I had a one of the professors that I work with came in and showed us a robot. I don't know if you guys do like the robotics competitions, the first robotics league and those, but Vex has a new robot that's AI enabled. And so you can talk to this robot and connect it with ChatGPT and tell it to turn right and turn left and what does it see and pick it up and all sorts of things. And it sits on a coordinate plane, so you can do like grid stuff with it and all kinds. So it's really cool robot. Those record that recording will be available pretty soon. This next one, this is a researcher at Georgia Tech. This guy was from Carnegie Mellon. This one will be a researcher at Georgia Tech talking about large language models and what they can do and what they can't do. And then I think this one they're going to be doing a game with AI for in April, right? So that'll be interesting. But yeah, so go all the way to the end and say feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions you want to chat.